All right, so this is going to be a review of Plane. It's the Gerard Butler movie that came out earlier this year. I can't remember when it came out. I think it was January or February or something like that. It's directed by Jean-Francois Richet, and I'll say how I feel about it in a second. So Brody Torrance, played by Gerard Butler, he's the captain of this flight, and he's trying to get to his daughter before New Year's Day or spend New Year's Day with her. So I believe they were going to Tokyo, and I guess he was going to catch another flight after that to get to Hawaii to his daughter. So there's a storm going on, and they're trying to, make it to Tokyo, through the storm. He wants to go to it through another route that's safer, but the person that's in charge of it, that deals with all that, tells him to just go through the storm. He should be able to make it. While that's going on, they also have Luis Gaspar, played by Mike Coulter. He's ex-military and things like that, but he's going to be extradited and charged for murder. Uh, so once they get to Tokyo, I guess he'll be extradited to wherever he needs to be charged. I can't remember where it was. So they get the passengers on, and they're in the air. Things are going okay, but the storm is obviously raging. Then they hit turbulence. Eventually, they get hit with lightning, I believe, and the comms go down and things like that. So the plane is going to crash if they don't land somewhere. So they end up landing in Jolo, which is this island that has no authorities, no nothing, and it's run by a dangerous separatist group. So the apparently the Philippine army won't even go on that island because they got they got beat there before when they tried to take care of this group. So this group is really dangerous. So the passengers are there, and they obviously their comms are down and things like that. So Brody Torrance, he ends up going with Luis Gaspar to find radio and things like that. Basically, they're just trying to get off that island before this separatist group actually gets a hold of them. So I didn't like this movie. It's largely boring. It's largely generic, but there were some good things. I actually think Mike Coulter was actually really good in this. He didn't really have much to do. They didn't really develop his character enough, I don't think. But I thought he was the best character in it. He gets the most action to do and things like that. We'll talk about that for a second later on. But yeah, I did like him. I think he's a good actor, right? And he's good with the action, things like that. I wish I could see him in more stuff. Obviously, he's not getting that Marvel check anymore from Luke Cage. Or maybe he will again at some point if they bring it back. But yeah, I really liked him in this. Also, there's another character, Scarsdale, played by Tony Goldwyn, and he's the person that the airline brings in to take care of this. He's the one that's headed up, being like, "Hey, we can get this going. We need to get these people over there to go get them and make sure we deal with this thing." And he's listening to the radio transmissions, trying to find them, and he's like, "Hey, we need to get our our story straight for every scenario." For the press and things like that. So I thought that part was interesting. It was like, okay, cool, we're getting the outside of what they're really trying to do. The climax of the movie, where everything kind of comes to a head with the separatist group and things like that, I thought that was the most thrilling part of the movie. I thought that was actually pretty entertaining, whereas most of this was kind of boring. uh, so that's where most of the action and the gunfighting and things like that happens. It's actually pretty tense, right? So I did like the ending of this movie, at least a little bit. So as far as the rest of the movie, uh, it definitely has a feeling of being like a direct to VOD movie, right? Like it feels cheap, like even looks cheap too. Like the lighting isn't all that great, it's not shot all that great. It's really dark, especially early on before they get to that island. So it's not a very good looking movie. So that's one part of it where I was like immediately when I started watching it, I was like, man, this just looks cheap and kind of bland. So that's part of it. Also the performances. So Gerard Butler, right? He feels like he's just kind of getting a check. His line delivery doesn't feel like he's really all that into it. He's Scottish, and at points he's really the character's really Scottish, like it's really harsh, a little too much, and then at points it's lighter to where it feels like the accent is kind of kind of coming and going, or at least at points it's harsher and points it's not so harsh. So that was also kind of throwing me off. And he talks to his daughter on the phone, like even just early on, because the daughter's in a couple scenes, and he's very Scottish, at least most of the time, and she doesn't seem to have an accent at all, which was kind of weird. Also, the passengers, right? This isn't a spoiler, it was in the trailer. They get captured by these people, by this dangerous group, and They're getting video of them. They have to say their names and what country they're from, and things like that. They get guns shot next to them, things like that, the guns pointed at them, and at points, characters actually do get gunned down. And I don't feel like they're reacting like they should be. This is terrifying, right? This is traumatizing, and I don't get it from these other characters. They seem scared, but they don't seem terrified. They don't seem nearly as scared as they should be, and so that was also a disconnect for me. But I think the main thing that makes me kind of disconnect from this is the overall story, especially when it comes to those elements. So you think from the trailer that this is just going to be an action movie. I heard somebody say, "Oh man, it's a great action movie." It's barely an action movie, really, for most of it. Really, up until the end. Gerard Butler, right? He's been in Olympus Has Fallen and things like that. He's kind of an action star, at least he was. So you see the trailer, you're like, okay, this guy, this captain, he's gonna have to grab this gun and have this unlikely partnership with this criminal, and they're gonna take out some dudes together and save these people. These people don't get taken until like what, like an hour into the movie, and even at that point, there's only been one action scene, and it was between Gerard Butler and one person, where he choked out this guy. It's like there's nothing, so there's not much to it at that point. And even throughout the rest of the movie, Gerard Butler only really chokes out two people. He's really not doing any of the action. He has a gun. I don't remember him ever using it. The main person that's doing the action is Mike Coulter. And it feels like a lot of it is too easy anyway, because they keep doing things like really easily. They only have to take out like two people to like do a certain thing. Or the villain and the villain group, they're just kind of they're there. We need somebody to shoot at. We need some villains to come after us, and the villains are kind of trash. They're kind of trash. Like by the time everything's said and done, I'm like, really, the Philippine army was scared of these people? They don't seem to be all that good. But it's just, it's bland. It's dull, even just to look at. Right? I like the ending and the climactic fight that happens at the end, but for the most part, I just didn't care. Didn't care about the characters all that much, other than maybe Mike Coulter's character. But that's it. It's generic and it exists, and that's probably about it. So I'm gonna give it a rental. Like I said, there's some things here and there that were all right, but for the most part, it's just mainly boring. So that's it. That's plain. Subscribe, and we're done.